So this is Alexander Kotov, a Soviet chess grandmaster who was playing in the mid-20th century and won the Soviet championship one time and was also a two-time world candidates challenger. Now this game was actually played in the 1953 Zurich candidates tournament, and his opponent was Svetozar Gligorić, a Yugoslav and Serbian grandmaster who won his country's chess championship a record 12 times. Now, let's see what happened in this super instructive game, and there are three key moments I want to draw to your attention. So, Kotov with white kicks off with d4, and we head down these opening moves, and black now goes bishop g7, king's Indian, not d5, the Grunfeld defense. So white takes the center, pawn d6 keeps an eye on e5, and now f3 starts the same-ish variation. We now get castles, bishop e3, and now black already plays in an older way. There's a modern way of handling this for black with pawn c5. It is a pawn sack, but it's one of the best ways to fight against the white setup, especially because you leave this diagonal open for the bishop. But in this game, we see pawn e5, white keeps the centre closed, very logical because they want to start attacking on the flank very often with these pawns, and now c5 played from black. Not the best. You know, a modern engine will tell you here that c6 is a bit stronger. Looking to take here, open the c-file, especially if the king ever wants to castle there. Now we see bishop d3. Knight h5 played, looking at the dark squares, opening this f-pawn to run. We now see knight g2 covering this knight's jump, and pawn f5. Very standard stuff from black. White takes on f5, the pawn recaptures, and now this is the first key moment we're about to see. So what was the best move for white here? Well, queen d2 was very good, because if black goes f4, you're not actually helping yourself as the black player, because after the bishop drops back, you've just opened this one, you've given up this monster e4 square, and that pawn can always be used as a hook to open the g-file later on. So why was queen d2 best? Well, we're going to see, because queen c2 was played, but now it gives this opportunity for Gligorić to play this insane pawn sack. I mean, insane's maybe a bit strong, but for the time, this was a beautiful idea. So the move to play, obviously pause if you want to think of it, is this pawn push of e4. Now, what's the idea? Because after white captures, forced, you know, this bishop is trapped, then here we don't recapture the pawn. That would be terrible. Pawn down, activating all the white pieces. Instead, f4 comes. And after this bishop moves away, well, here's the point. You've now squashed this one. It's just so dead behind its pawns. You've opened your own bishop, and this knight can't get active very quick. Great compensation from the pawn, sorry. So knight d7 played, coming into this square. Now we see knight g1, nice remaneuver, looking to activate that knight, and queen g5 already fights against that because it targets this pawn. Really annoying move. So the bishop drops back to cover. Now we see knight e5, knight f3 hits the queen. It drops back to here, and white decides to chop off that powerful knight. The queen recaptures, and we see castles queenside. Knight f6, recycling into the game, looking at this pawn and maybe hopping to g4. And that's why white now goes knight h3, doesn't like the look of that one, and bishop d7, completes the black development, connects the rooks, and looks at these ideas now of pushing on the queen side. And just to say at this moment, by the way, although black's a pawn down, we've got all the compensation we've talked about, but the game's still kind of balanced, you know, could go either way here. Bishop d3 now reactivates into that game. No longer needs to cover the pawn, although it's not exactly active, right? Bad bishop. Now a6 played, preparing b5. We see knight b1, anticipating the fact that that knight might get kicked around. And now this is the second key positional moment. Just a beautiful idea, because this knight is heading for d2 and then into f3 potentially. But what does black do to fight against that? A second pawn sack. I mean, here Gligorić was just on fire with his positional ideas, because after this one is captured, well, here's the point. Knight h5, and again, just look at the dark square domination. Look at this absolute monster. Now the knight hits d2 and protects this pawn. Technically best was bishop e1 coming to c3, actually giving this pawn if the white rook wants to take it. But okay, knight d2 played, and now this knight hops into f4, targets this pawn here, and so bishop f1 covers. I mean, that bishop is not having a nice life, right? We now see b5 from black and pawn h4, dealing with the attacks on this pawn, preparing rook g1. And that's why king h8 anticipates this rook move, and then we even see bishop to f6. Not a forced move by any means, but black just wants to make sure white can never chop that absolutely amazing dark squared bishop. Knight b3, now played. I mean, it looks a bit clumsy there, but it does block the b file. Possibly you might be going knight a5, c6 one day, and rook a b8 now looks to rip open that b file potentially. But after bishop e1, black now changes track, because that bishop's coming to the long diagonal. Black doesn't like the look of it. b4 stops that idea. Now king b1, rook a8 prepares to run the a pawn. The b file's now closed. The bishop bounces back to g3. Its job here is done. No more action on that diagonal. And now rook g8 creates this pin, and queen h2 intensifies the pressure. And this is the third key moment of the game, because there are tactical shots in the air for black, which the black player finds. So can you guess the move that was played here? So what we see in the game is rook takes on g3, an amazing idea using these checkmating threats, because if the queen captures, this is mate in 1. Therefore the rook has to capture, and what's the follow-up move from here to round off the tactic? So the way to play and follow up is this knight hopping into e2, unleashing yet more tactics. And this is a good moment to pause, by the way, because I've been literally looking at these kind of tactical positions using AIMCHESS, who I've been partnered with now for 4 or 5 months. They are sponsoring this video, but I cannot recommend them enough for learning tactics, improving your chess, because they will take positions from your own games to use in the tactical training. They pull in the data from Lichess and chess.com, and then you can improve using positions that come up very regularly. It's completely free to sign up, so it's worth giving a go if nothing else. And if you do want to sign up to get all the bells and whistles of a premium account, you can use the code EPIC at checkout to get a great discount in month 1. Now that piece aside, back to this game, well, you can't actually take with the bishop here, because if you do, again you're getting mated. So what does white do? We'll take with the queen. By the way, you can't go rook d2 either. No time for that, or the knight takes here. So queen takes, forced. Now this rook drops, and the knight now hops back to c1. It wants to come to d3, cover the mating square, and also try and activate. a5 now played. The knight hits d3. Bishop d4, look at that monster piece. Now h5 from white, and the queen just nudges back to h4 here, pressures that pawn. I mean, you could carry on with a4, but okay, black in no rush. Now bishop g2, I mean, how miserable has that piece been all game? But okay, it sets up the rook coming to the h file. We see rook g8, rook h1, queen g3 pressuring this bishop. It drops back, what a fun time that one's having. Now a4 played, king c2, a3, b3, and I've marked that as an exclam move just to indicate that that's actually the end of the game, because I'm very sorry to say the game did not end in a decisive result. The players actually agreed a draw here despite all the positional instructive sacrifices. Now, why a draw? Well, it's actually hard to make progress. This position is zeros when you run it with the computer, because say you go rook f8, pressuring this pawn, well, the bishop can cover, you can nudge back, attack the bishop, it can drop back, and it's just difficult for either side to actually make progress. I hope you enjoyed this exceptional game and learnt something from it. To see another classic game, then check out the video on screen. Thanks very much for watching, and see you soon.